I'm going to talk about AI, and I'm going to be relating it to streaming, but I'm not going to talk for 30 minutes about AI and streaming. I'm going to be talking about AI and giving you examples. There is a white paper on the topic of AI and streaming, or AI in streaming, and it is on a webpage called nextpaper.me. And there are several sector-specific AI strategies. And one of them is related to streaming, and it's yours to download. I started writing these. I'm a researcher by training and trade, and now I live off of board positions. And I've been talking about digital transformation and the urgency of us understanding what a world driven by data really means for the past 10 years or so. And in the last 9 months, I've decided it's time to turn a page and level up from digital transformation to AI. But to be honest, it's still the same story. It's just that the urgency has become even greater. So I'm going to talk to you about why AI, more than what is AI and the difference between narrow AI and generic AI and so on. When it comes to streaming, I thought, well, I haven't really worked in your industry. I'm more of a great customer. I belong to a family. When they ask us, are you a Netflix family or a Viaplay family, or we are an everything family, to the point where I actually have a secret Netflix account so it won't be contaminated by my kids. I have worked with streaming. I was media. I was on the board of a big publisher in Norway for a long time. And I remember there was a really big struggle to get them to start believing in ebooks or in audiobooks. I remember board meetings where, I was saying, I really don't think that we need a new device for every audiobook we sell. People will eventually download them on this device. And they were telling me, yes, Silvia, but you're not our typical user. And I really don't know who they thought their typical user for audiobooks was going to be. They also didn't believe that there is a market for audiobooks, same way as they didn't believe there is a market for digital school books. And to a large extent still don't. And of course, this is very much driven by existing or past business models and existing or past identities of these companies built on those business models. So one of the most important things I want to communicate is this necessity of rethinking the business models as the technology evolves and opens new strategies, really. And then the other thing I like to add here is, please remember this is happening at a speed we've never seen before in human history. Another company that I was deeply involved with was the Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation. I was on their board for a while. And they are extremely innovative when it comes to content creation. Several Emmy Awards and brilliant child programming, etc. But there's still a lot of legacy, and that legacy holds us kind of in place, or maybe makes us slower than we really need to be. So when I think about the big heroes of AI, for me, Netflix is one of them. Their big content recommendation competition was one of the annual events that really moved the needle on our ability to do fancy things with AI. And I hope that kind of research combined with good business development continues. So in 1999, I was in Silicon Valley, and I worked in a search team of something called the DEC SRC, Digital Equipment Corporation Systems Research Center, and they had a search engine called AltaVista. Does any of you remember AltaVista? Yeah. Most of you are too young to remember a time where internet didn't have a business model, because we were eating lunch with the first 16 employees of Google, And they were laughing at us because DEC didn't really believe in search engines and didn't want to invest in AltaVista. And we were laughing back because Google didn't have a business model and couldn't get any money. They went IPO in 2004, so this is 5 years before their IPO. At the IPO in 2004, we were still laughing because we didn't believe that anyone will pay $135 a share. There's many, well, at least 1,000 times increase on that value. But the problem is, looking forward in a world distinctly different from the one we are learned to operate in, we can't imagine how that world is going to work. We didn't see a business model for internet. The internet was, frankly speaking, a tool for a network based on a protocol developed for war conditions. And then it was adopted by a few research institutions, and it was used to exchange some research materials. And okay, so, there was pets.com and some other stuff, but there really wasn't any money. And in 1999 or 2000, everybody who was saying this was perfectly justified. It was the dot-com crash. And this is a very, very important example because I have a total déjà vu feeling now with AI and what's happening today as I had in 1999 and 2000 with internet. So if you believe that I should have bought Google stock or become employee number 17 in 1999, had I known then what I know now, then please listen to me when I say that probably we should think in the same way about AI. And the problem with AI is that it's so big, it's so complex, and it's happening so fast. So many of us, and there will be lectures about AI, and there, I attended a lecture by a brilliant young lady a couple of days ago, and she talks about the boson, Higgs boson, etc., and data analytics and protein folding, and it's all very, very exciting. And then the lecture ends, let's go. And then you sit there, let's go, but where? And I think that's our problem with AI. We don't differentiate it from data analytics, and we don't understand where's the business. The business can be many things, but we haven't learned to monetize it yet, the way that we haven't learned to monetize the internet in 1999. We say that ChatGPT was the iPhone moment of AI. Do you remember about 13 years back when Steve Jobs came up with the first iPhone? It wasn't the first smartphone. We still didn't know what the business model is going to be, but most of us had this feeling that there's something here. This is going to change many things, if not everything. That's what's happening with AI now. Because of ChatGPT, because of all these visual image generative tools, because of all the machine learning that we are beginning to play with, because many of us have used Google Translate with its video, or maybe the map search with video, or many of the things that are just coming up now. If you haven't been using GPT version 4 with video, it's amazing what's happening from week to week in the development of these tools. We are beginning to understand there's something very, very disruptive about this. And that's what I would really like to try to communicate to you. So how does business value grow? Well, exponentially, like the power of all of these digital things. And you can see it here in, for example, Alphabet, the mother company of Google, $550 billion in the summer of 2016. That's the company that didn't have a business model in 1999, right? That's the mother of Google. But and they still only make money off of Google, really. And we still don't understand, why. Are we really going to consume that many ads? But of course, we're beginning to realize that there's something related to finance, to health, to transportation, to logistics, to many other kinds of data and areas where they're going to be super, super relevant. Apple, $570 billion in 2016, 2017, $800 billion. 2nd of August, 2018, $1 trillion. 2 years later, $3 trillion. And there were lots of quotes from companies in your sector that were dismissing both Apple and many of the others among these as not really competitors to what they are doing. So the first thing I want to say is that these people are not growing the same way as normal companies. And by the way, for every one of these, there is a Chinese counterpart. And China is probably growing even more aggressively when it comes to AI than Silicon Valley and Seattle-based companies. So there is something that's not linear growth, 3, 4, 5, 6% per year. There is this extreme growth, and I think it's really important to try to understand why. And of course, it has to do with new business models, subscription-based stuff, annual recurring revenues, personalization, co-creation or prosumers, completely new way of both content recommendation, content production, security, moderation, and integration in many other kinds of technologies. Interplay with virtual reality, interplay with IoT, where you can get really, truly contextual ads based on where you are, not just what you were doing, or even integration with the cameras on your phones or on your cars that will eventually use this emotive AI to serve you with what they believe you need just now. And if the sort of things that Cambridge Analytica did based on our data from Facebook, they are going to be able to read you and your needs better than you can read yourself, right? Now then we come into this virtuous or very negative feedback loop. We don't know yet, and that's where all the ethical problems come in. There will be lots of content contamination with deepfakes and all kinds of ChatGPT like created data that feeds back into the pool of data that the next AI is going to be mashing up. So there is a new world of content, and there is a new responsibility on all of you. One of my favorite books on the topic of media and digital transformation, and it is written before the age of AI, is called World Without Mind, and it's written by a guy called Franklin Foer, and it's editor of one of the really nice, proud newspapers in the US that kind of gets engaged with one of the Facebook founders, and they start a digital newspaper, and it all starts with a very big honeymoon and ends up in tears. And it shows a very interesting conflict of these two cultures. There is a hybrid culture that we need to try to develop, and I think it would be really interesting to understand how the good broadcasters and streamers work really well with the geeks, with the techies that know how to build things, but maybe don't understand the world of editorial content and this almost sacred duty of controlling our collective mind and consciousness that you are in charge of. This comes actually as a driver of this VUCA world. The world today is more complex, but also more volatile than it has been for a very long time. VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And there are many very good reasons for, how it's driven there by climate, by demographics, by many other things. But among other things, or maybe mainly, it's driven there by digital exponential growth. There are a few companies in the world that now have bigger economies and therefore also bigger political power than many of the national governments. And it's really interesting how COVID, which was a health crisis, grew into something much bigger. We thought it was going to be a health crisis, but it grew into a security crisis. We saw Ukraine, we see now Israel, we see Myanmar, we see Afghanistan, we see a bigger number of conflicts and very unstable areas in the world than we've seen for about 30 years. It has also given us a world with economic contraction for the first time really for the first time at this length since the Second World War. And all of this is giving us a very, very unstable, nonlinear system that the world has become today. In mathematics, we call these systems, the nonlinear dynamic complex systems, we call them also chaos systems. And the main characteristics of these is that they're impossible to predict. You can't look back and based on 3 quarters or 3 years, predict the next 3 quarters or next 3 years. You have to think scenarios and you have to navigate based on your understanding of the main drivers and some very big strategic courage related to this. Part of that strategic courage is understanding how tools like AI are changing the market dynamics and the business models in your sectors. So AI is not just another technology. It is the core technology of this fourth industrial revolution, and it infects many other technologies like VR, like blockchain, like cybersecurity, or like even genetics. We say it might add $15.7 trillion to the global economy by 2030, but to be perfectly honest, it's like this. We don't know. We don't know what the business models will be based on AI. People say that the next greatest company in the world will be an educational company. Why not one of you? Edutainment, provided by amazing streaming where people co-produce and it's peer-to-peer based learning. Nobody has figured out how to do corporate lifelong learning. Universities certainly don't care because their business model is based on one-time learning, right? 85% of businesses consider AI to be a strategic priority. The only problem is nobody knows where to start moving. The reason why I think there needs to be more sense of urgency here is that the speed of adoption has increased very much. And if you look at traditional technologies, for example, you have a busy graph here, but what you need to see is that there are many lines here, and each line is one technology. And these are years from 1900 to 2005. And here we see the percentage of US population that has adopted this kind of technology. So this is the line for the telephone, and this is the line for electricity, and this is the line for clothes washer. But then you can see the line for cell phone and internet and computer. And this graph was made before ChatGPT, because if I added the line for ChatGPT here, it would be completely vertical. We reached 100 million users in 5 days. And a week later, we were at 100 million users. We've never seen anything like that before. And it has to do with this connectivity, but it also has to do with accessibility. It has to do with this fourth industrial revolution. So if you think about the first one, we learned to use steam to mechanize production, approximately 1770. Big deal. I mean, we got some factories. Yeah, but it turned out to be a political revolution as well, because the guys with the biggest factory suddenly outcompeted the guys with the largest number of hands or swords or horses. So the capitalists won over the feudalists, right? There's always a social revolution related, and the new world order related to a completely new ability to produce things. The next revolution, industrial, was in 1880, 1870. We learned to use electricity at a large industrial scale. We broke down the huge machines into series of much smaller machines, and these machines turned out to be very well suited both for mass production but also for specialized work. So we had to start doing higher education, and we urbanized because we could move away from wherever we were mining or where the electricity was produced. 1970, another 100 years later, we learned to use electricity and IT at an industrial scale, and we automate. So this is not an IT revolution. This is something else. So right now we say we are living a cyber-physical revolution. Cybernetics, it's control systems applied to the physical world. So it's basically the physical world driven by data systems. It's when you make a digital twin of your body or of a consumer's viewing preferences, and then you operate on that digital twin in order to affect the physical thing. That's what Cambridge Analytica did when they analyzed our psychological preferences and made us vote for Trump and Brexit. That's what we do when we control whether the Tesla is due for an overhaul, or that's what we do when we are optimizing an oil platform. That's how we are going to manage our health. That's how we're going to manage our finances, buy our banks. That's how we are going to manage everything. What's necessary for cyber-physical systems? Well, it's data, it's connectivity, and it's computational power. Those three things have grown exponentially, doubled their capacity every 1.5 years since 1970. And that doesn't sound like a lot. Since 1970, we've had 50 years, 4 years. 54 years, and there is a doubling every 1.5 years of the power of the underlying technology. So about 35 periods of 1.5 years in these 55 years. And that's 2 to the power of 35, stronger, cheaper, faster computers we have today than we had in 1970, which is why each one of you is holding more computing power in your pocket than NASA had when they put the first people on the moon. And that's what we're driving our media units on as well. That's what's driving our cameras. That's what's driving our ability to produce, our ability to consume. And it's this immense computational power, the amounts of data and connectivity that we are completely taking for granted. But that's what's underlying the fourth industrial revolution. Moore's law is this exponentiality thing, but Amara's law is just as important. Gordon Moore made this law about the doubling of computational power every 1.5 years. Amara, it's not so much about technology, but it's about humans and technology. And he says that we always overestimate technology and its effect on the short haul and underestimate it on the long haul. And you can see that with internet, you can see it with mobile phones, you can see it with smartphones, and you can see it with AI now. So the thing about the fourth industrial revolution that's making it different from anything else is that it's exponential. It's this very, very, very steep growth that we get now, which is why I'm worried that if you think 3 years back, let's say 3.5 years back, just at the outbreak of COVID, before Ukraine, before the energy crisis, before the value chain crisis, before the chip crisis, before what's happening in Israel, before Myanmar, before Afghanistan, before many other things. And then try to think the other way, 3.5 years ahead. Do you believe that the world is stabilizing, is going to change less? Or do you believe it's going to change just as much or more, like the previous 3.5 years? There's nothing to show that the world is calming down, right? It's even less stable than it was 3.5 years ago. The important point here is that we don't know what it's going to be like in 3.5 years, but we have this kind of growth in the underlying technology of AI. And that's why we need to figure out relatively fast what it means to us and what we really want to do with it. Another graph to show you the pace of change here. So starting from 1900 to, let's say, 2030, 2030, about here, we're checking how much computational power we have in the world to match something that we have in nature in terms of brain capacity. And let's say we started, if we look at 2000 and 2020 here, we are matching one mouse brain. Very quickly, we are moving to a human brain, and AI systems now have the capacity of a human brain or more. But because of this exponentiality, we believe that in approximately 10 years, we will be at the stage where all human brains in the world put together have less computational capacity than what our AI will have. And from there on, we don't know. We simply don't know. And we don't know when we are coming to this point where machines learn faster and become better at this so-called general artificial intelligence. And this point is called singularity, because after this, we simply don't know. But there is a consensus among all people working with AI that within a confidence range of between 20 years from now and 70 years from now, so within this century, we're going to get there. Now, the problem is that if we all stand back and wait until regulators have figured out what they want to do and we keep worrying about GDPR, etc., what's going to play out is the game decided by those who develop these things. It's going to be decided by the Googles and by the Alibabas, or the WeChats or the Amazons. So the decision you have to make is, do you want to be a part of the team that decides and that figures out, nobody knows how to make money yet. We don't have a monetization answer like we didn't have for internet 30 years ago. But we believe that there is a game, and the only way to play it is to start playing it, basically. Start small, get some budget, find people who are curious, and start figuring out how you could use AI for content creation, for content recommendation, for content moderation, how you could combine it with 5G for better accessibility, for cloud-based editing, for better sustainability of all the climate effects that your business has, for using blockchains to provide people with better programming capacity, etc. Lots and lots of opportunities. I mentioned quite a few of them in the white paper, but what's more important than the concrete examples is your willingness to start being curious about this topic. Many areas to go, and all of these areas are really AI areas. It's the new foundational technology. It's used in all industries, but at very different stages. So it is, as people say, the future is already here. It's just not very evenly distributed. I mean, each of us has a certain perspective, ability to see ahead. I think these three people have more capacity for that than most of us. And it's amazing how some of the best, biggest, brightest thinkers in the world believe that this is the most disruptive, the most exciting, and the most worrying thing that's happened to us in all of humanity. If you're not worried and excited at the same time, you haven't been paying attention. Okay? So Stephen Hawking said that success in creating AI would be the biggest event in human history. Unfortunately, it might also be the last unless we learn how to deal with the consequences. And yes, there is bias in data, because data is based on past human behavior, which is very biased. And yes, these AI systems are not transparent. Well, we need to figure out how to deal with that and how to ask for some functional certifications, assurances. Yes, they can be hacked. Yes, the data can be contaminated. Yes, it might not be evenly distributed. Lots and lots of challenges. But if we just stand back and wait for somebody else to deal with those challenges, then it's certainly not going to be solved according to our values. Bill Gates, you cannot not be amazed by him and admire him. And he says, the development of AI is as fundamental as the creation of the microprocessor, the PC, the internet, and the mobile phone. It will change the way people work, learn, travel, get healthcare, and communicate with each other. And then finally, I want to mention this guy called Jensen Huang. He is the boss of NVIDIA. And in the world of computers, we are very concerned with chips. I already talked about Gordon Moore's law, and chips have had many different evolutionary stages. So we started with a huge computing centers, then we moved over to PC chips, then we moved over to mobile phone chips, and each of them became, smaller, and we are at an atomic level now. Then we started using NVIDIA chips. And NVIDIA chips are super parallel computing chips, very well suited for graphical interfaces that you might be concerned with, but also perfect for AI. And so they have been supplying a lot of the computing power for AI in the last 2-3 years, especially for deep learning and neural networks. And he says, 20 years ago, all this AI was science fiction. 10 years ago, it was a dream. Today, we are living it. It's moved from science fiction to science reality. And I think it's really important to exploit, be opportunistic about this science reality. So I think that's my final... Oh, by the way, NVIDIA chips are going to be the old school in 2 years from now, because we believe that 2 years from now, we will have industrially available quantum computing. What happens then? Again, we don't know. But the question is, are you going to be just an observer, or are you going to try to ride this risky but incredible AI wave? And there is a very nice quote there on Facebook, which I'm using now. So imagine a half full glass of wine. And imagine there is a handwritten note and says, well, the technology optimist and the technology pessimist, even maybe the technology realist, thought about this glass of wine. You know, is it half full, half empty? I drank it up. Greetings from the technology opportunist. So I really hope that you will be a playful, a little bit brave technology opportunist within this incredibly powerful and influential sector that you're working in. Good luck.